Hello all, old geek again, and this is the second of my module tier list videos. In the first one I did first edition AD&D modules from 1978 to 1983. This one is mopping up the other ones that didn't fit into that category that I know enough about to put in a ranking. So you've got the basic modules in here, you've got some expert modules in here, and some of the 84 onwards AD&D ones. You will notice there are going to be quite a few gaps, because it's only fair that I know enough about a module in order to give it a ranking. I mean, I've got to be fair to a piece of paper, haven't I? So the modules that I've only really just skim read, I'm not going to include. Everything in this list I've either DM'd, played one or more times, or at least prepped in order to play, or read enough of it in order to be able to start running it. So there are some really good ones that I haven't done enough work on yet that I can't put in here. I'll mention them in passing, but let's just dive in. Categories. S category is geek category. That is the top category. That is reserved for the best of the best. A category. A is nerd. Pretty good. There's more than pretty good. Good stuff goes in nerd. B is dweeb. Those are modules that generally have a lot of good stuff in them, but might require a little bit of work to get the best out of. C is dork. The ones I'm a bit meh about. Not always terrible, not always great. You might be able to get something you like from them. And D is table flip. The modules that I suggest nobody ever bothers with. Anyway, let's get started. The B modules. Now, these are possibly the most nostalgic ones for a lot of you guys. Especially those of you who started with Moldvay Basic or Holmes Basic. I didn't. I started with Mensa Basic, the red box set, so I don't have that as much nostalgia towards especially B1 and B2 that a lot of you guys will have. But B1, In Search of the Unknown. Now this was the original module to come with the basic books, and it served a specific purpose. It was a teaching module. It had information in it regarding stocking the dungeon. The dungeon was a framework. It was a well-described framework. The map, I thought the map was all over the place. But there was a lot of really, really good ideas baked into those rooms. And some of those ideas became D&D tropes. Such was the impact that it had. I'm putting it in nerd. Now, I know there are people who would put it in geek, but I think as an intro to D&D, it did a fine job, but because of that map, really, I think it never really bit me, because the map just felt too random. Right, B2. Some people reckon this is the best module of all time. It spent a long time as the default module you got with basic D&D. I didn't. I don't have a feeling of nostalgia towards B2, and I personally find it's lacking a little bit of character. I much prefer the Village of Homlet as a starting sandbox, because I think it's more flavourful. B2 feels it's like it's a monster menagerie. It's a humanoid menagerie, but again, it's got those teaching elements to it. And as a teaching framework, giving the characters a base of operations, giving the DM something to build upon, it does a fine job. I know a lot of you want it to put it straight into geek, but because I believe it does a very good job at what it does, even if it doesn't hit me in the feelies like a lot of you, I'm going to put it in nerd. B3. Palace of the Silver Princess. Rather infamous. Gene Wells' version was pulled as soon as it was released, and thus the original Orange B3 commands a high price. But the original Orange B3, people say, oh, it was because of the artwork, all of that. It was also a bit of a mess. It was handed to Tom Moldvay, who had to try and put together something that worked. And it was a bit of a poison chalice. It's got all the feelings of a fairy tale adventure, fairy tale palace, but it's a monster menagerie again. And it has some really good NPCs and it has some really good encounters, but it's just, yeah, goes in dork. B4, The Lost City. This was what Tom Moldvay was good at. This was a tour de force. Much more focused than the previous 3 adventures in the basic series, and yet there was room for expansion. Yes, those last 4 or 5 pages detailing the lower parts of the pyramid, just sketching out the framework, were very forgettable. But then you've got those factions in the upper tier. Such an evocative dungeon. Beautifully done. Beautifully done. And if somehow you've not experienced this adventure, get the Goodman Games remake. And okay, the newer stuff and the developments are all done in 5th edition, but it's so faithfully done, in my opinion, most of it is, that it's very easy to roll it back to basic. You get the basic adventure in there reproduced and the 5th edition conversion. Now if you port the new 5th edition stuff back to basic, I think you've got just an awesome campaign. The Lost City is one of my favourite adventures of all time. It goes in geek. Horror on the Hill, B5. I've not run it. I've not read it. But I've played it. So my opinion is going to have to be based on that playthrough. And I enjoyed what we did of it, though it did feel too difficult for the size and strength of party that we had. It's a level 1 to 3 adventure, and I got the feeling that it was geared more towards levels 2 and 3, more toward level 3. And I've read bits and pieces about it that talk about quite how rough it is. I did enjoy the playthrough. We died. Didn't get... I think we got about 2/3 of the way through. I'm going to put it in dweeb, because I do have good memories of playing it. But it might be better, it might be worse. It's one that's sort of not sure. Now, The Veiled Society, B6. I've played through it twice. A long, long time ago. And I loved its atmosphere. I loved the fact that it was a basic adventure set in a city. But it's linear. And it's short. And it's all a little obvious. You got these stand-up cut-out models with it, houses and what have you, which I think was a little bit unnecessary because we played Theatre of the Mind. But I like what it attempted. I just wish there'd been a bit more meat to it. It's going to go in dweeb. It's one that could easily have been a nerd if it had been bigger. Okay. X1, The Isle of Dread. First adventure I ever owned for basic and expert D&D, because I got an expert set and I got the Moldvay Cook expert set around the same time I got my Mensa basic set. So it is the first adventure I attempted to run. It was an absolute car crash because I didn't know how to DM, I didn't know the rules, didn't care about the rules, I just wanted to dive into fighting T-Rexes. But that module, it's evocative. It's very evocative, and it's a sandbox. It's a sandbox that's great, great source for development. And there's a lot of AD&D modules you could drop in it, such as Dwellers of the Forbidden City, Hidden Shrine of Tomorrow-chan. They would all go in there very, very nicely. And for that purpose, I think it's the best expert level sandbox. There it goes, geek. X2, Castle Amber. I started and stopped playing this many, many times in my early teens, mainly because we died so often. And when I came back to playing D&D again, running D&D again, it's one of the adventures I most wanted to run. And I converted it myself to 5th edition, because the group were playing 5th edition at the time. So I've never run it with the basic or expert rules, though I have played it with those rules, and I loved it. And yes, I found it a little bit awkward to convert, but the feedback I got from the adventure from my players was off the scale. The craziness, the imagination. Yes, I do wish the land of Avaroin was a little bit more developed towards the end, 'cause it's a big old adventure. But that chateau is just, it's fantastic. It's a really, really good adventure, and that goes in geek. Alright, Curse of Xanathon. This, of all the ones that have gone in so far, this is the one I have the least experience of. Based on, I remember one playthrough when I was a player in my teens, and we didn't get very far, didn't find it very interesting. The DM didn't really like it. We never really went back to it. I have skim-read bits of it, and I can see why. It doesn't grab me, and it's going to go in dork. X4, Master of the Desert Nomads. I've run it using Expert D&D, and I've run my own 5th edition conversion of it. And even though it's linear, it plays really, really, really well. And the Evil Abbey section at the end is absolutely magnificent. But there is that linearity to it. I suppose that might be why it fitted quite well with 5th edition. I was able to make it very episodic. And I like it. I like it a lot. And despite it being linear, and me not generally enjoying linear adventures, I'm going to put it in nerd, because it actually plays very, very smoothly. X5, the Temple of Death. This is a brutal module. This ended my first attempt at running a 5e campaign using converted materials. This ended it. The party bit off more than they could chew. It was horrible to convert. Really, really rough to convert. Really difficult. I do apologise. There's a lot going on outside. If you are picking up things, sounds like somebody's chucking things in a skip about 3 doors up the road. Back to the Temple of Death. For me, this is the opposite of X4 in that I think it reads better than it plays. It's got less of a structure than X4, and some may see that as a benefit, but there's a lot that the DM has to do to it to make it work. But it's a sort of adventure where it makes you want to do those tweaks to make it work. I'm going to put it in dweeb. It's all right. It is all right. Okay, now an odd one next. M2 or M Solo 2, as it was rebadged because the Masters series came out. The Maze of the Riddling Minotaur. I bought this solo adventure quite early on, about 84. I think it was 84, 85 it was released. And I don't think it worked all that well, to be honest. It's not terrible. It's just a bit average. XL1, Quest for the Heartstone. you've seen my review of this one. Greedy, lazy, cheap tie-in, horrible, formulaic adventure, just an excuse to sell plastic toys, go straight into table flip. Don't care. Maps were nice. Maps were nice. Module is atrocious. I've seen people on social media recommend Quest for the Heartstone, saying it's a good adventure. They're wrong. Okay, now we go on to the remaining AD&D ones. And these are pretty much in alphabetical order regarding the module codes. I think I've got them, apart from the last one. That's okay. I'm going to start now with C3. Lost Island of Castanamere. Tournament adventure. Obviously so. 32 pages, of which about 12 pages are adventure. Very, very verbose descriptions. Terrible editing. Nice artwork. Very, very lazy character names for the pre-generated characters. There were some good ideas in it, but it just did not work. And it's one of the adventures that put me off buying more modules. It's as simple as that. I was yearning, when I was buying adventures, I was yearning for the same sort of experience as the White Plume Mountains, the Against the Giants, Lofty Sands of Sojkanth. And when I bought this, I was like, where are they going? What are they doing? Table flip. CB1, Conan Unchained. You know what I think of lazy tie-ins? Absolutely abysmal. This adventure it's there in the bottom 3 or 4 adventures of all time, well, of the AD&D period, in my opinion. Atrocious. And look at that symmetry. Look at that symmetry. 3 in each category. Perfectly balanced. Perfectly balanced. Now to knock it out of whack. DL1. Dragons of Despair. The module that started off the Dragonlance surge, shall we put it, of the mid-80s, when everything was Dragonlance. Now, it was linear. Very, very linear. No, DL1 was not based on a novel. The novel was written after DL1, 2 and 3. The modules were done. So, those of you who are about to chime in and say that, no. It's not linear because it was based on a novel. It's just linear. It's based on somebody else's game. Tracy Hickman's game. And to me, it has... Look, it's got good artwork, nice maps, good cover. The Dragonlance world, the world of Kryn, is interesting. I enjoyed the novels. But when you start with an encounter with Viewmaster Toad, where he delivers a monologue and walks away and there's nothing the players can do about it, and it pretty much ends with a battle with a black dragon that flies off after 3 rounds, no matter what the players do, doesn't that give you an idea of what the adventure's all about? On train tracks. And for what it did to the hobby in terms of linear adventures and swamping us with lazy Dragonlance modules, it's going in table flip. And you'll notice that there's none of the other DL modules in here. That's because I didn't play them. I have skim read them, but didn't. I started as a player in DL1 3 or 4 times. And we just lost interest. We just got bored. I-10, Ravenloft 2, The House on Griffin Hill. This had the unenviable task of following up I-6, one of the most iconic adventures ever. And it didn't do it very well. It tried to top I-6 when it needed to complement it. It's too convoluted, too complicated. There are some decent ideas in it, but it's put together messily. I've not run it. I've only read it and prepped bits of it. And I know I don't want to run it from having read it and prepped bits of it. Goes in Dork. H1, Bloodstone Pass. The first one in the high level series. First battle system module. Yeah, I can forgive it was set in the Forgotten Realms. I'll forgive it that. And the H series went completely off the rails. But H1 was surprisingly playable. And it was quite well put together. Yes, it's quite limited in its scope. You've got to have these high-level characters and the interest in playing the tabletop war game part of it, because that's such a big chunk of it. But it's worth a look. It's not a bad adventure, and it goes in dweeb. You know what's coming now. We're on to N2. The Forest Oracle. If you look in this table flip section, we've got Quest for the Heartstone, Lost Island of Castana, Mir, Conan Unchained, Dragons of Despair. 4 steaming turds. I should have created an E category here, called E, Forest Oracle, because it's almost unfair to those 4 bad adventures to put Forest Oracle in with it. The worst adventure of all time, bar none. It's an absolute train wreck. Badly edited, awful maps, horribly linear, and just encounters that make no sense. The text reads like it's written by a 10-year-old. Right. Calm down now. N4. Treasure Hunt. The N series suffered because it had very tough, complicated, but brilliant Against the Cult of the Reptile God as its first module. The Forest Oracle is its second module. N3. Destiny of Kings. Never run it. Didn't interest me. I skim read it, but I'm not putting it on here because I don't know enough about it. And then along came N4. And it included rules to start you off at level 0. And help for a DM in developing novice characters and learn some DM tricks. Okay, the adventure itself is a little bit forgettable in places. But it's hard to write a compelling adventure for level 0 characters who can't do anything. I think it's quite worthy. I quite enjoyed it. It goes in dweeb. Okay, Temple of Elemental Evil. You all know how much I love the Village of Hamlet. Brilliant sandbox, and it's included in here at the start. And from T1, Village of Hamlet, we move on to the town of Nulb, just up the road, which is pitifully short. What a waste of an opportunity. It's supposed to be a den of thieves, a real cesspit. And it's just a few pages. And then you go into the temple, where, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there and a lot of interesting hooks. But it just requires so much work from the DM. Yeah, if it grabs you, by all means, go ahead and do it. Enjoy it. It's a massive, hugely involving, hugely immersive dungeon crawl. But you've got to do so much work to put it together. You've got to do so much work to get it going. And one of the reasons for getting a module is to save yourself a little bit of that work. It just felt too... Dork. Temple of Elemental Evil goes in Dork. Could have been great. Could have been fantastic. But it's better than I-10. It's better than the Riddling Minotaur. It's better than Curse of Xanathon. But it's not as good as those modules in Dweeb. UK3, The Gauntlet. How many of you in America remember this? It's got a really, really small playing area. The map is quite confined. It's a cliffside keep that guards a mountain track and a valley. And it feels like a cliffside keep, built to guard a mountain track. Claustrophobic, it's got proper defences, it's logically laid out. It's been taken over by a group of gnolls that are in various degrees of intoxication. Fun. It includes a humdinger of a siege as the party desperately defend against an onrushing army, using that perfectly laid out keep and all of its defences against that army. The Gauntlet UK3, written by Graham Morris, is one of the best AD&D adventures of all time. Play it with UK2 The Sentinel, which is quite a gentle introduction. It's okay, it's not brilliant, but played together they work really, really well. UK4, When a Star Falls. This is a beautiful little adventure. The attention to detail is absolutely second to none. It's got a beautiful blend of exploration, combat, interaction, story. It flows. Yes, it's a little linear. It flows well. The plot is excellent, and the way in which it gives the clues to the plot and implants the plot in the players' minds. I love it. Absolutely love it. I love the little touches, the little messages on the top of each of the pages in the adventure. I like the internal art style. I love the way it's presented. It's so easy to read. Information is so easy to get at. I love the way they've done the sages and how it all fits in with the Tower of Heavens. And it's using aspects that were underused, aspects of AD&D from the Dungeon Master's Guide that were underused in so many other adventures. Having said that, all those beautiful details are for the DM's eyes. I've run it twice, and while yes, thoroughly enjoyed it, and yes, my group have enjoyed it, I do wish it presented more of those details that are for the DM more openly to the players. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's a DM's job, but by the time you get into the Sage's Tower, you've already learnt that there's evil afoot in there, and you're not going to learn, you're not going to pick up on all those touches of the Sage's fields of expertise, because you're unlikely, once you've got into the tower and worked out which sages are good and which ones are bad, you're unlikely to speak to them, have a dialogue with them, and learn about them. So it's got to go in nerd. It's got to go in nerd. Because I mean, I love it to bits. It's so beautifully presented. The details are great. I just wish there was an easier way of getting those details across to the players. UK5, Eye of the Serpent. Another unusual module. The UK series was full of unusual modules with new ideas. This was very much a first level adventure, and it was a wilderness adventure, and it was designed for a party of about 4 characters, and it played into the abilities of a ranger or a druid. It does suggest a monk, but no, rangers and druids are suited to this. It had this strange path system whereby you're meant to have certain routes open to certain classes. I throw that out the window. No, there's no need for that. The environments flow nicely down the mountain in the adventure. And the environment is really well described, and the encounters are nice and varied. But there are far too many encounters where it is simply the enemy attacks. Roll initiative. And the mountain feels like a bit of a menagerie. And the background, again, it requires a lot of work from the DM to even incorporate any of the little hooks that are in there. Yes, they're in there, but as is, it is just a little bit bland. But the framework is there for DM to produce something very, very interesting. And it's so ambitious. Exploration tier focused on wilderness, low level, small party size. How many of us had groups of more than 4 or 5? It was perfect for that, and you've got to give it a lot of credit. It's going to go in dweeb because it didn't quite hit the bullseye, but it was a near miss. UK6, All That Glitters, wasn't quite as ambitious as the earlier UK modules. I've not run it. It's one of those I have prepped to run without ever having run or played. So I've read it from cover to cover, made notes on it. I know it pretty well, and it hasn't quite grabbed me by the short and curlies that a lot of the other UK modules have. But the whole premise, All That Glitters, is a bit of a clue. The whole premise of the adventure is an interesting one. I would certainly like to run it someday, and I'm going to put it in the dweeb tier. Okay, WG7, Castle Greyhawk. Officially the last AD&D product I ever bought before exclaiming sod this and pretty much not playing anymore after about 99. I bought it in about 91, 92, a few years after it was released. I didn't know anything about it because, of course, you didn't have the internet back then, and I thought it looked like fun, and I liked the idea of a Castle Greyhawk, and it sounded great. And I opened it up, and it's an absolute travesty. Unfunny humour. It's a complete piss take. It's disrespectful. It's a waste of money. I felt utterly fleeced, and yeah, it contributed towards me giving up. Table flip. In fact, it deserves to be lower than Table Flip. It deserves to be in the Forest Oracle category with the Forest Oracle. Simple as that. We're going to finish up with A0. Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry. Now, this was a Wizards of the Coast produced module for AD&D. When they redid the Slave Lord series in the Slavers package about 10, 15 years ago now. And it's got an odd art style. It doesn't do the job of leaning into the Slavers series very well because the DM's going to have to put a lot of stuff in between. The level gap is far too wide between this being a low-level adventure and the Slavers series being on the cover 4 to 7, but really 6+. But what you do get with Danger at Dark Shelf Quarry is a pleasing little sandbox adventure, very much in the old style. Yes, there are some oddities. There's some bits of it that are imperfect. It's got a few quirks that I don't like. But to see an adventure that feels like an old school sandbox produced in the, I think it was the late 4th edition era, but for 1st edition, was very, very pleasing. So I'm going to it's between dweeb and dork. I'm going to give it a dweeb rating because I do think it's worthy of us oldies having a look at it. I think it's got enough in it to make us go, nostalgia. Right, so that's my tier list. No doubt I'll have ruffled a few feathers with a few of the positions there. If your feathers are ruffled, then tell me so in the comments below. Don't just do a lazy downvote, dislike, bear. Just argue with me. Say your piece. Tell me in the comments below. If you do like the video, like, subscribe. Join us on our regular live streams. Come to the Discord channel. Play some games as well. I've got an OSE game starting soon. I run MERP every other Saturday. Games for people like me and you to play. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed it. I've been the Old Geek. Till next time, see ya.